Garrison Hill Park we know today has a long history. Originally formed during the movement and thawing of the Ice Age, the 298-foot rise is a geological formation known as a drumlin. In 1623, from New Hampshire's first settlement at Dover Point, came early pioneers who ventured up the Piscataqua River and settled by the village at Cocheco. These pioneer families began farming the unforested land on what used to be called the Great Hill. Later, in 1675, one of the earliest garrison homes was built by Richard Otis for protection against invading Indians. Many such garrisons were later built near the slopes of Garrison Hill as a means of defense against the growing number of local Indian attacks. During the 1700s, the area became known as Varney's Hill. It was given the name after Ebenezer Varney, a blacksmith and devoted Quaker. Through marriage, he had come into possession of the land and had built his home on the western side of the hill back in 1696. The original Varney house stood until 1970, when it was torn down to make room for a large-scale apartment complex. In 1829, John Ham purchased the Varney house and property. Soon after the purchase, the name of the hill had changed again, not to Ham's Hill, but to Garrison Hill. Claire Howe, treasurer of the Garrison Hill Park and Tower Committee, explains the origin of the name Garrison Hill.
Garrison Hill got its name from the houses or garrisons which were built on the hill about the time of perhaps the French and Indian War, so that the people could protect themselves. And the Garrison Hill came from the garrisons that were built there.
There is still an authentic garrison house which is standing and completely intact right here in Dover. Andy Galt, president of the Garrison Hill Park and Tower Committee, explains where.
If people are interested in finding out more about what the garrisons used to look like, they could visit the Woodman Institute down on Lower Central Avenue, where there is a garrison, the Dam Garrison House, that has been retained in its original condition. It was saved, I believe it stood down near Dover Point, and was saved from destruction back the turn of the century or sometime thereafter, and was moved to the Woodman Institute. So people can actually see what garrison homes used to look like. What we now call a garrison is far from what the colonial people used to know as a garrison. So if people are interested, they could visit the Woodman Institute.
The panoramic views of both mountains and seashore made Garrison Hill a favorite site for picnics and outings. And by the early 1800s, it had become a popular recreational area. In 1850, the Democratic Party was victorious in the national election. A group of local Democrats got together and decided that a large celebration was in order. They planned an enormous parade, complete with fireworks, political speeches, and a bonfire on top of Garrison Hill to celebrate the election of James Buchanan, the 15th President of the United States. It was decided that a cannon should be located and fired as a ceremonial salute. A committee went to the Navy Yard at Kittery, Maine, and purchased a large British cannon that had been captured during the War of 1812. It was transported up the river by boat to a local landing, where it was then hauled by oxen to the top of Garrison Hill and placed on the westerly side. It was proudly given the nickname the Constitution by the men who had purchased it. Tragedy struck days later when the cannon was fired at 7 p.m. on the day of the celebration. It misfired prematurely and killed both young men who had loaded it. The cannon would not be fired again until 1875, when it was moved to another location on Garrison Hill. It was fired once more on the July 4th centennial, this time without mishap. The original British cannon can still be seen in Dover. Claire Howe explains.
Yes, at one time there was a cannon up on top of Garrison Hill. It was used. It was a working cannon at one time. And then when the park started not being used and the tower started falling into disrepair, the cannon was moved down to the Woodman Institute, which is on Central Avenue in Dover. And anytime anybody would like to see that cannon, all they have to do is go to the Woodman Institute, and it's located between the two buildings in the yard. And that was the original cannon that was up on Garrison Hill, and it was used for defense purposes.
By 1880, the top of Garrison Hill was jointly owned by Joseph Ham and Harrison Haley. Haley, an entrepreneur and cashier at the Cocheco National Bank, would succeed in making Garrison Hill even more popular than it already was. At a cost of $1,000, he constructed a 65-foot-high wooden observatory. It was designed by renowned architect B.D. Stewart and modeled after similar structures found on Coney Island and in Davis Park, Philadelphia. The tower, known as Haley and Ham's Outlook, was a full 5 stories tall with open balconies on every floor and topped with a mansard roof. At a cost of 10 cents per ticket, the tower attracted 6,000 people in its first year of operation.
Well, back in the 1870s, this was on the horse carriage, horse trolley system, a rail system between Dover and points north. And this was one of the stops. Harrison Haley, who owned or was a partner in the trolley system, owned 10 acres of land on the top of the hill. And in the 1870s, or 1880s, he constructed a wooden observatory tower here, which stood until it burned by accident in the 1890s. He charged admission. There was a little restaurant, snack bar type arrangement in the base of the tower. There was a roller skating rink out in the field here. This was back before the city bought the top of the hill and put a reservoir up here. So we had a roller skating rink and the restaurant, and there was a carriage road that came up the back side of the hill, which you can still see. You can access it off of Varney Street. And people came up here. They walked up the hill. People came up on horse and buggy up the carriage road. It was a very popular stop for people on the carriage, on the trolley road, because it gave them an opportunity to get out and exercise and have an opportunity to enjoy the view. Back in the 1880s, the view was the thing. Haley charged admission to his tower. I think it was 10 cents. Got you to the top, and you could use the telescopes up there and see Mount Washington to the north and the Isles of Shoals off to the south and all points in between. So it's a very popular recreational area. When the city purchased the land up here in the 1880s to create a reservoir back in 1888, it became a city park because the observatory was still left here. The skating rink was moved up to Central Park, which is off of Willan Pond, and was continued to be used up there for many years afterwards.
In 1885, E.F. Quimby, a Dartmouth professor, completed a topographical survey of the many sites that could be seen from the top of Garrison Hill. A map was drawn, and it was determined that 41 cities throughout Maine and New Hampshire could be viewed from Haley's and Ham's Outlook. In 1888, the city of Dover purchased 8 acres of land from Harrison Haley on the top of Garrison Hill for a cost of $3,000. A year later, a 2 million-gallon reservoir for the city's water supply had been constructed. The roller skating rink was moved from the top of the hill across town to Burgett Park in order to make room for the reservoir. Thus began the decline of the Garrison Hill Park and Recreation area. The crowds left the hill and began going to Willan Pond for amusement, boating, and entertainment. Claire Howe explains how the newest railroad, the electric railway, took visitors and pleasure seekers to Central Park.
It used to start down at Sawyer's, the trolley, and the trolley used to come up Central Avenue, and it would drop people off at Garrison Hill, and it would continue up to Central Park, or Burgess Park as you called it, and drop people off and then turn around and come back down. It was on Willan Pond. That was a large amusement park at one time. And the only building, I believe, that is left now that was with the park is where the cars are sold, right across from the shopping plaza that's up there. And that is one of the original buildings. I believe the trolley cars used to go in there or used to be stored in there or something, but most of that park is gone now.
Haley's and Ham's Outlook remained on Garrison Hill until June 27, 1897, when a careless smoker's match set the wooden structure on fire and burned it to the ground. Many pleas were heard to rebuild the tower, but the City Council's lack of funds would make this impossible. In 1911, 14 years after the Haleys and Hams Outlook burned down, Mrs. Abby Sawyer bequeathed $3,000 to the city of Dover, the equivalent of $300,000 by today's standards. The city was to erect and forever maintain an iron tower on Garrison Hill. It would stand as a memorial to her late husband, Joseph Sawyer, a lineal descendant of Ebenezer Varney. Mrs. Sawyer also left an additional $4,000 to establish and maintain a park at the top of the hill on the recently acquired city property. On August 2nd, 1913, the magnificent 76-foot iron observatory was opened and became the landmark of Dover. Charles Tasker, a lifetime resident of Dover, recalls how active the park was in previous years.
And I've lived in the Garrison Hill area, actually just in this house, since 1912. And this house was owned by the person, Abby Sawyer, who gave the tower in memory of her husband. And I believe it was constructed in 1913. And as I say, we have lived here since 1912. And as kids, we always played around that tower up there, and so did a lot of other people. Not only played there, but older people had picnics there and visited there. And this cement wall out here in front of our house, I can remember Sunday after Sunday when you could hardly find a seat to sit on it. There weren't many automobiles around in those days, and people would walk up from other parts of the city and sit on the wall out here and rest for a while, and then continue their way up to the Garrison Hill Observatory Tower to take in the sights, or have their lunch, or just rest, or whatever their particular program happened to be for the day. World War I, it was used also as an observatory up there, and was manned, I believe, 24 hours a day, watching for any possible invasion from the enemy, because, of course, in clear weather they could see Portsmouth and the naval base very clearly. I remember as kids we used to go up there and talk with the watchman and so forth that stayed there.
It's been a great place for people in this area over the years, and when we've had booths at different shows and home shows, a lot of older people in Dover tell us how they used to go up there with their intendeds, and they said they used to go up there to spoon, which is kind of cute.
Yeah, they had quite a recreational area up there. There was a toboggan chute that went north towards the Wentworth Douglas Hospital. And in fact, the chute was so speedy and so long that they had to cut off the top part of it. They had some Canadian experts down here, and they estimated that they were probably doing close to 100 miles an hour.
1960s, the city of Dover was forced to close the Garrison Hill Park and Tower property because of rowdy parties, drinking, and repeated vandalism. 10 years later, in 1974, the city of Dover went to court in an attempt to lessen its responsibilities for the maintenance of the park and tower without violating the terms of the Abby Sawyer will. The court found that the city may either restore the tower completely or demolish it and replace it with a stone monument.
I have been involved since the 60s with the tower, and we have fought long and hard to preserve it. We've had a lot of setbacks, but for a long time we were actually, the committee of the members that were interested were really having almost a running battle with the city. We finally ended up in court at one point in order to form the committee to try and preserve the tower. And in '78, we had an actual committee organized with the original committee members, and they pursued it, especially Roland Heeman devoted a great deal of time and energy to keeping this thing alive. And we went to court to try and get permission from the courts to try and raise the money to preserve the tower, because the city had turned us down as far as any help was concerned. Roland Heeman and Claire Howe and Frank Chenevet and Frank Moniz and some of the ones that have been with it way back, we fought for it with the city council. We had funds one time to do it, and then the city council voted it down, so we lost them, and the tower definitely was in a state of disrepair to the point that it could not be used at all. And they wanted to tear it down and put a monument up in its place, and they actually got in a court order that they could do that. There was no need of the tower ever getting in the condition it was in the first place. When they started having rotten steps and things like that, and it needed painting, they didn't do any of the maintenance, even although there was a trust fund there to take care of the maintenance. The funds were not used to repair it until it got so bad that they felt it was not repairable. And this is when we came in, we had engineers, and they said that it could be saved. But I just think it's a great place. We've got nothing like it. It's a historical point in the city of Dover. For many years, the postcards, the old trolley used to go up there. They used to have baseball games, and there was a skating rink. It was a very, very active park back in the early 1900s, late 1800s and early 1900s. It was really quite a recreation spot. And it just seemed too bad we've got so little left to lose one that's so unique.
It's a shame that the tower hasn't been kept up. There was money left by Abby Sawyer to help, at least, I don't know the amount, to keep the tower and its passageway in shape. But it seems to have drifted away. I don't know what has happened to it. And the observatory, of course, can be seen coming into Dover from most any direction that you want. And it's a real landmark for the city of Dover. And it seems like it should be one of those landmarks that should be preserved. Dover has not been very good about preserving its antiquity. And that's one way that they certainly could do it.
More than 10 years had passed since the closing of Garrison Hill in the mid-60s. A growing number of people concerned about the restoration and maintenance of the historic park began to speak out. In 1976, Senator John Durkin announced that a federal grant of more than $37,000 was available for the park's restoration. On March 17, 1977, the Dover City Council rejected the idea of any further repairs to the tower and voted against spending any of the available funds. 1 year later, the park's recently formed Citizens Advisory Committee found only $9,000 left in the Abby Sawyer Trust Fund and threatened a lawsuit against the city of Dover to determine how and where the money had been spent. Soon after, despite local interest and involvement, the city determined the ski area on Garrison Hill to be unsafe and closed it down, ending the last attempt at recreation in the park. In 1981, the Garrison Hill Park and Tower Committee Incorporated was established as an autonomous private nonprofit organization to raise funds and restore the park and tower.
So Mr. Heeman spent many, many hours between the city and Concord and the courts, and the rest of us supported him at that time to get a court order so we could organize our own committee to replace the tower. We finally got that commitment from the courts, and the city was told they had to cooperate with us at that point. And we now serve as a committee to restore the tower and raise the funds to do it. We have to report annually to the courts as to what we have done and if we are really active, otherwise they would rescind our power.
Some of the committee members explain how they became involved with Garrison Hill Park.
Well, one day a gentleman in Dover came up to my door and said that somebody had told him that I like to work on community projects and would I be interested in this one. And after listening to what he had to say, I said yes, because when I got married and came to Dover 30 years ago, Garrison Hill was one of the first places my husband took me up to see, and we climbed the tower and right up to the very top, and the view was absolutely great from up there. And you can see way out to, you can see the Isles of Shoals out in the Atlantic Ocean, and you can see Mount Agamenticus over in York, way over that way, and to the west you can see the mountains out in Nottingham, or the hills out there. And so I was quite impressed with the view from there, and it's something that I think that maybe a lot of people should see and would like to see again. So I said yes, I would get involved, and I did and am and will be until we see this thing through.
Well, I live at the bottom of the hill, and I remember the park and I remember the tower with fond memories. I remember my father taking me up the tower and being afraid of the heights and holding on to his hand as we walked around the perimeter. A lot of nice memories of the park, and anybody that comes up here has to be impressed by the quietness and the solitude that's here, and the potential that this has of being a wonderful recreation area. Years ago, I was never a fanatic about skiing, but I tried to learn to ski on the slope here, and so I saw the tower falling in disrepair and heard through some neighbors that the committee was trying to get activated again, and decided that it was time that something happened, and somebody got involved, and they picked me as a member of the committee.
I've had quite a bit of interest in the tower over a period of years because my kids used to come up here and slide when they had it open for that. Early on, I used to climb the tower when they had it open, and I think it's a shame that people can't get up and see the beautiful view that you can see from this tower. And when I found out a few years ago that there was a committee that is interested in doing something about it, why, I sort of got involved, asked some questions, and next thing I know, I was on the committee. And my main thing lately, I've been trying to get some of the trails opened up and so forth, because I work down at Harris Graphics, down on the backside of the hill here, and it's a nice easy walk for me to come up at noontime, and I enjoy that, and I get a few other fellows to come up with me sometimes, and that's my main interest, is to try to get the hill usable, and hopefully someday the tower, so we can go back up in that as well.
I got involved in it way back in the 60s. And I guess because when I was younger, we used to go up there, even although I was not born in Dover. I spent a lot of time in Dover. I had a lot of friends in Dover, and we used to go up there for picnics and climbing the tower, and it just seemed such a wonderful spot. And so many of the older historical things have just disappeared, and there's been so little interest in it by a lot of the people that I became very much interested in it when they said they were going to tear it down.
The consequences of years of neglect led to extended decomposition of the tower. Because of this, it was deemed more feasible to tear the old tower down than to try to restore it. Late in the afternoon on a raw New England day in October 1990 marked a milestone for the Garrison Hill Park and Tower project. A once active observatory and park, Garrison Hill would take its first step on its way to resume its intended purpose as stated in the Abby Sawyer will. Laced with a select few anxious onlookers, the dilapidated iron tower met her demise. In 1988, Andy Galt stepped down from his role as president of the Garrison Hill Park and Tower Committee. Irene York assumed the role of committee president, relinquishing her title of vice president to Rick Hebert.
I've been involved for about 6 years now, and I came up to the hill one day and met somebody up here, and he told me that they were in the process of wanting to rebuild a tower, and so I offered my services and went down and talked to Andy Galt down at the bottom of the hill where he was living. Explained to him that I could help out and do some fabricating on the tower and help out with other ideas and such like that, landscaping and tree removal and such like that. I've just had a background in welding and fabricating since I was about 12, and been doing welding and making trailers and helping people fix vehicles and such like that. And I built screening plants and conveyors for my business at Barrington Sand and Gravel, and also own a gyroscope business where I do metal fabrication. So I have a pretty extensive background in metal fabrication and such like that. So this was just a big project with a lot of pieces, but it wasn't anything difficult by any means. So, but we all put our efforts together, and here you go. Since we've been constructing the tower, it's basically been myself and in the beginning a number of the committee members were helping out, and they kind of dwindled out, and then I've had probably 4 or 5 other people, a couple of the older gentlemen that have been helping out, and Cabot has been helping out quite a bit with me and been a big help, and we've had some younger kids come down and want to help out and such like that, and there's really nothing for them to do, but we let them carry some wood or some bolts or something like that just to participate a little bit. And it's, some of the older men have contributed a lot of ideas and stuff like that, and they've got different backgrounds from the shipyard or different businesses they've owned and through the years, so everything all together has really helped out quite a bit. Basically Dave Field and I have virtually coordinated all of the efforts to put the tower up. He's done all of the drawings and such like that. And on the old tower, I physically climbed it and measured every single piece on it and yelled down to Dave and told him what the figures were. He took the figures and went in on Harris Graphics CAD computer and put everything on that and had it come out all to the proper measurements and such like that. He's been extremely instrumental in that, and everything's come out very accurate. After he did that, I took all the figures that he gave me in the drawings and prints and went to my shop and fabricated most all the pieces with the help of other committee members and volunteers. There's been a number of obstacles that we've had to overcome over the years. New updated building codes and structural codes that we've had to exceed or meet, and for the safety of different things such as earthquake proof or wind loads and such like that. Theoretically, you could have a number of people up here, or a few hundred people actually, and in order to make it safe for everybody, we've had to upgrade a few of the different components in the tower itself, from the footings right up, so that it's safe for everybody in all conditions. We've had a number of different ways over the years that we've tried to raise money, and recently we've gone door to door in the Dover area in a certain location and tried to do that, see how we made out, and we did quite well for the time spent. We've had concerts and horse shows, the Dover Home Show. Continental Cable has helped us as far as doing some advertising, and pretty much throughout we've raised pretty much enough money to finish the whole structure and hopefully to put something back into the trust fund for future maintenance costs. One of the big contributors to the funds for the restoration were, it was an idea that I had with the arch plates that tie the top of the legs together, and we were going to put in the people's names, stamp them physically into the steel so that they'd be forever lasting, and for the people who donated at least $500 and up, either a business donation, a personal donation, in memory of donation, and then we have a plaque that has a little bit of the history and some of the committee members' names on it and such like that, and that raised quite a few $1,000s for that, and which really helped out in the end here to get things really progressing and moving right along, so, and to help finish things up. Well, a couple of years after I was on the committee, I explained to them that it didn't appear as though there was going to be enough funds to be raised in the direction that they were going to go to redo the tower. There just wasn't enough public awareness or public concern to raise enough funds to go out and have somebody physically reproduce the tower at a fabricating company or something like on that sort. And so I told them, I says, the really easiest way for us to do this, I says, it seems as though everybody on the committee here is committed, and they're very committed to doing the job and finishing it up. And I said that our best bet would be to take the funds that we have right now and purchase the steel and fabricate it ourselves. So that was the decision we made back in about 1989, I believe it was, in the summer or fall of '89. We did that, and then we proceeded to take down the old tower, because the old tower was in such a bad shape that we didn't feel it was worth all the effort to replace certain pieces, and other pieces were still pretty well gone. They're all 80 years old to begin with, so we didn't feel it was in the best interest of the tower to piecemeal it back together. So we bought new steel and immediately started fabricating the steel, along with, back in the October of '89, I took down the old tower and we cut that all up into small pieces and stuck it in the dumpster, and we sold that to Harding Metals, who gave us about $700 and something for that, so that helped out. Then we proceeded to dig out the old footings and replace the footings and start right from the ground up and come with everything brand new again, or as much as we can. We were able to save the old railings off the old tower, because they were in fine shape. A couple of them were missing, and I needed to refabricate those. But as far as any of the old tower, there's probably about 2% of the old tower still on this one here, so it was kind of nice to save some of it for the future. Well, one of the more time-consuming efforts was to fabricate all the steel, and I laid out every single piece of the tower for the new structure, and we had a number of people to help us out in punching the holes or drilling the holes. We first started out to drill the holes, and that was going to take a long time. So I had the idea of getting a fabricating punch, which simply just hydraulically punches a hole right through the steel, and it takes about 2 seconds to do. So when you have approximately 10,000 holes, that's a lot of time. So we spent $5,000 for a punch, and that saved countless hours of time and energy for the volunteers, which is really hard to get people to come out on certain times, or to coordinate everything. So it was pretty difficult. So we saved a lot of time and energy on buying a punch. The work was done physically by hand. All the pieces were either carried around by volunteers, or some of the very heavy pieces, such as the legs, which are about 30 to 40 feet long, I used my loader to carry them back and forth and to fabricate them. But most everything was handled by hand by the volunteers to fabricate it, bring it into the shop, fabricate it, and then carry it back out to be painted outside. So there was an awful lot of human effort that went into this tower, pretty much along with, I'm sure, the original tower. Was a lot of human sweat went into that. Well, in between the times where we had money or help to work on the tower itself, we'd work around on the park to refurbish the park and bring that back to the way it should be. I've spent a number of hours clearing trees out for a vista, and that we decided where they should go, as the committee decided where they should go. And I got my chainsaw, and we started clearing out some trees and brush and such like that, and we had some bonfires, and we did that basically throughout the spare time that we had, and also through obstacles with red tape and such like that, with certain people not wanting us to, for whatever reason, to refurbish the park and clear out some of the trees that have been overgrowing for a number of years. And it really doesn't make any sense either to rebuild a tower that's 60 feet or 70 feet tall and you can't see over a 70 or 80 foot tree. So there's still an awful lot of landscaping around that needs to be done. In the beginning, when I was first starting to do the landscaping around, I went around and I found out where all the boundary markers were, and consulted with Don Black, the Stratford County Forest agent, and what his requests were as far as the proper way to do the job as far as clearing out the trees for the vista, and I explained to him what we wanted and such like that. So I consulted with him and a couple other people on the subject, and to do the proper job for the situation at hand. Well, we're pretty much to the point now of being finished. We only have a little bit more to button up on the tower itself, some more painting to it, and to put the arch plates up and to put the roof on. I've had just an incredible amount of help from a few different people that have helped out and volunteered. Without them, I don't know where I'd be right now, and I'm just personally really appreciative of all the help that they've given and all the time that they've given away from their families in their summer and such like that. It's a good feeling for myself, and I'm sure other people throughout the years are really going to enjoy this. We haven't cut any corners, and we've done nothing but get the best of materials that we could that would last as long as they possibly could. So this structure should be up for, I would have to say, at least 200 years, or at least until I die. And so I'm sure that there's going to be a number of people who really enjoy this and get a number of educational aspects out of it. And I'm really happy to have used a number of my talents that I've learned throughout my lifetime with the different jobs that I've had throughout the community, and I guess this is one way of helping to pay back something that I've gotten from the people around the community, to give back to them and to the generations to come.